I'm with Bob Kerr today, and this is our continued series, trekking around the world and climbing some of the world's highest mountains on Bob's attempt to do the 7 summits. So I'm going to say hello to Bob. It's good to see you again, Bob.
Yeah, it's good to see you again, Myrddyn.
And today, Bob, what continent and what mountain are we going to go up?
I thought today we could talk about the highest point in Europe. And you know, some folks say it's Mont Blanc, some folks say it's Elbrus.
And as far as Elbrus is concerned, because I believe that's the one that the majority of people consider is the highest, where is that situated?
Yeah, Mount Elbrus is located in the Caucasus Mountains of Russia, between the Caspian and Black Seas. It's on the European continental plate, but a lot of people don't consider that region of southern Russia to be part of Europe, and that's why many Westerners consider Mont Blanc to be the highest point in Europe.
So, have you done the 2 hills?
Yes, I've now been up both of them. I did Mount Elbrus in 2006, and I consider that one to be the highest point in Europe. But just to avoid any doubt and debate on me doing or attempting the 7 summits, I also managed to ascend Mont Blanc in 2007, my second attempt to achieve one of my life goals, which was to do Mont Blanc before I was age 30. And on the second attempt I managed it in a weekend at age 29 and a half. Only 23 hours from Edinburgh Airport runway to the summit.
23 hours. That is quite incredible. Before we start detailing Elbrus, Bob, if I can just ask you, 23 hours from Edinburgh Airport to the top of Mont Blanc, what on earth did you feel like when you summited?
I was feeling great. I was like, my body couldn't believe that I was up there. I wasn't feeling any altitude sickness because I don't think my body had realised I was up that high before I was down again.
Absolutely extraordinary. So as far as Elbrus is concerned, you sort of give a little bit of detail where it is positioned. Now, again, this is the continued series of your attempt on the 7 summits. So we're now dealing with the highest mountain in continental Europe. Mm-hmm. How high is it?
Mount Elbrus has got 2 tops, and the higher western one is 5,642 metres. There's also an eastern top, which some people mistakenly do, and that's about 21 metres lower. And some organised groups just take them up the eastern one because it's marginally easier for the guides.
It must be shocking, Bob, if people wander up to the lower eastern top thinking that they're doing the highest point in Europe.
Yeah, I'm aware that some folk have had that unfortunate experience. I think some folk watching this video may know Mr. Alan Dawson, the author of a great Marilyn list. He unfortunately went up the eastern summit.
Well, we discussed putting that in the video beforehand, Bob. So, but good on Alan as well, because as you said, probably a summit that's not ascended very often. So. Yeah,
Alan's probably had a more interesting experience because I hear that there's an old Land Rover at the top of the eastern summit which had been driven or pushed or something to the top of that one, whereas I just went up the tourist route up the mountain and saw the bog standard summit.
So, as you mentioned, Elbrus consists of 2 summits, the western and the eastern summit. What about the first ascent?
The first ascent was quite a long time ago. I'm going to have to look at a crib sheet because I can't remember. It was before my time. The lower eastern summit was first ascended on the 10th of July 1829. That was led by an Imperial Russian Army scientific expedition, their General Emmanuel. The higher western summit, the first recorded ascent was in 1874 by an English expedition. I think that should be British actually, and was led by F. Crawford Grove.
So quite a few years, isn't there, between the eastern and the western summit being first ascended. Now, it's in quite an interesting part of Europe, isn't it, southern Russia, because that it borders with Georgia, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's a very interesting area politically. That region of Russia where Elbrus is located borders Georgia, but you've also got the region of Ushia nearby, which is another politically unstable area. and for quite a long period of time Elbrus was closed to Western mountaineers. So until about 1985 it was closed, and then it was periodically too dangerous, and the UK government advised against all travel to the region, and it goes between periods of it's dodgy but you can go, to definitely don't go to that region. It's really safe and you should go.
Because I should imagine, Bob, part of the joy of what you're attempting to do when you get out to these high mountains, as well as the climbing to each of the summits, it's also the cultural experience as well of the areas that you visit.
Yeah, it's really interesting seeing the different cultures, and southern Russia really gave me a bit of a shock as to how people live in this unstable region. We were seeing buildings that had been shelled. We saw big military guns turning round quite often, pointing to different parts of Georgia, and there was bullet holes in the minibuses we used, and it was a wake-up call. As you know, this area is a little bit dangerous, but folk are still getting on with their lives. And
now, as far as these videos are concerned, Bob, we're doing it in chronological order, and this is the third out of the 6 that you've done so far and 7 that you hope to do.
yeah.
What time of year did you go out to Elbrus, and also what year was it?
We went out in August 2006, which was not long after my previous 2 of the 7 summits, getting through them quite quickly at this rate.
And of course the previous 2 were?
Previous 2 were Kilimanjaro, which was done in January 2005, and Aconcagua, which was summited on the 30th December 2005.
So as far as the journey out to Elbrus is concerned,
yeah.
What was that like?
It was an interesting experience going out there. It was one of these trips that was full of adventure from start to finish. I hadn't even left Aberdeen Airport when things started going a bit pear-shaped. You may remember in 2006 that there was a shoe bomber on a plane at Heathrow Airport, and we were sitting in Aberdeen getting an extra security screening, and we were on one of the few flights that left the UK that morning. We landed at Schiphol Airport in Amsterdam to find out about the shoe bomber, and that there was no more flights leaving the UK that day, so I was lucky to get out of the UK. But because of arriving there with all the extra security and a bit of delay, it meant that I'd missed the connection to Moscow. So I got rerouted via Warsaw in Poland, and then on an old Aeroflot plane to Moscow. To arrive in Moscow, I discovered that all of my luggage hadn't been loaded in Warsaw, and I had the privilege of dealing with the Russian authorities, who didn't speak any English, fill in a form all in Russian. I don't speak Russian. And it wasn't just my luggage. Not one bag was loaded on that aircraft from Warsaw to Moscow, so it was a plane load of people with no baggage. It was shocking.
Well, as far as when you arrived in Moscow, I believe did you have a couple of days wait until you were then joined with with friends that were going to attempt the ascent of Elbrus?
Yeah, I had a couple of days in Moscow just to appreciate the culture of the place. I spent most of the time dealing with the authorities trying to get luggage and getting very frustrated. Because of the shoe bomber, we hadn't been allowed to travel with hand luggage. It was, you travelled out with your wallet and your jacket. That was about all we were allowed to carry. But I'd sneaked in my mobile phone and a camera, so so at least I was able to get by a little bit. But it was very stressful trying to get all your climbing kit so you can then fly down to southern Russia and go climbing.
So you were joined on this trip by who?
I was joined on the trip by 2 friends from the north of Scotland, Graham McFadgen from the Ascent Mountain Rescue Team, and a guy called John Cuthbert, who had been working with a site in northern Scotland.
So how long did you spend in Moscow before you headed south?
After John and Graham joined us, we flew south the next day, and when we got down to southern Russia, we met 2 other individuals who would be climbing with us as well. One was the principal or the Dean of the University of Cyprus, and there was another English gentleman who joined us as well, a guy called John as well.
So then presumably would it be by truck or coach towards the mountain from there?
It was a minibus transfer, and from arriving in southern Russia till we got out of there, we had guides with us, people local to the area who could speak the lingo and help get us out of any difficulties we might find ourselves in.
Now, when we were introducing this video, Bob, you mentioned a little bit of the cultural experience.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that there were sort of various people from the army, I believe, and you also said before we started filming about gun placements that you were encountering. What about sort of permits to climb the mountain, and were you ever sort of stopped by the military when you were over there?
We were stopped a few times during our acclimatisation walks by random people and also some soldiers who wanted to check our permits, and I think our guides either gave them some money or promptly dealt with them. We don't really know, but there was one occasion on our acclimatisation that our guide looked worried, and that worried us a wee bit, because we were doing a wee acclimatisation trek up to a col to look down over the border to Georgia, and we went up through this forest. There was a military checkpoint, basically the border control, and there was nobody there, and the guide was shouting out trying to find the person to present the permit, and couldn't be found. So we progressed on rather cautiously, trying to look out for the guy, but we didn't really like going there in case we might have got shot at or something. But that was the least of our worries on that particular walk, because higher up the glacier there was a big rockfall which came shooting down the glacier towards us, and we were thinking, oh dear, we're between two big crevasses and the rock's coming towards us, this isn't good.
Well, if we backtrack just a tiny bit, Bob, and you mentioned taking the minibus towards, again, presumably where base camp would be. So once you arrive there, if you go through the sort of routine of what you do, because something we haven't covered in the previous videos is almost like the daily routine. Who puts the tents up? Is there a mess tent? At what time in the morning you sort of get up, and what do you do each day before you actually do the acclimatisation tracks and also the climb itself?
With Mount Elbrus, it was a little bit different from Kilimanjaro and Aconcagua. When we got down to southern Russia, we arrived in a small village called Terskol, and we stayed in a hotel. Just sort of there, we were being treated like ordinary hotel guests. We weren't smelly climbers by that point yet, because we hadn't been up the mountain. But this part of Russia, it was quite interesting just seeing the interactions of people, and there was quite a strong mafia influence. You had people with blacked out windows on their Porsches and their Mercedes, etc. And then you had the blacked out windows of Ladas, which really sort of made an impression on us, because we thought these are like the second tier mafia.
So when you're actually at the hill and at base camp, things like sort of tents and mess tents, are they sort of there for you, or do you have to sort of erect your own tent, or?
Yeah, with every expedition it's a little bit different. Depends what you've basically contracted. For my 7 summits, because I'm busy trying to earn some money and pay for the trips, I've just organised through reputable companies, and they sort out a number of the logistics, such as providing tents, but we do get involved in putting up tents and helping with getting water, helping with cooking, things like that, because it all helps pass the time, but also helps with the teamwork, build a rapport with the locals that you're with, and it's really good trying to speak some local language with them.
Now, presumably with Elbrus, would you do some either acclimatisation treks or climbs?
We did 2 acclimatisation walks for Elbrus, just gradually working us up in terms of height. And out there I actually enjoyed the acclimatisation walks a lot more than I enjoyed being on the mountain. They were much cleaner and much nicer views.
And the environment that you're talking about now, Bob, you know, in amongst the Caucasus Mountains. It must be quite incredible.
It's really incredible scenery. There's big glaciers flowing down to beautiful streams, nice like forested areas. Then you've got human settlement and places that have been bombed, and you know, just sort of great contrast to the natural beauty.
Now, you mentioned the acclimatisation tracks. Was it 2 that you did before you attempted the summit? And how sort of long were they per day, and how many metres of ascent?
The walks varied. Some days there may have been about 1,000 metres of ascent, so just like a standard hill day in Scotland, really. But lower down we were also dealing with a lot of heat. It was really warm going out to that part of Russia in August. So you know, shorts and t-shirts, sunscreen on, real good summer holiday basically.
So after the second acclimatisation track, what is the procedure after that? Were you ready to start the climb?
Yeah, by that stage we were ready to get up the mountain and get out of southern Russia. We wanted to get up the mountain and get out. So from Terskol we headed up the mountain past the barrels where quite a lot of people stay, to a hut that's a little bit higher up the mountain. Sorry, I can't remember the name of the hut, but there used to be one hut at this location and it burnt down, so we stayed in the rebuilt one. But the remains of the burnt hut are still there, and there's piles of rubbish there, there's sewage lying on the mountain. It's a horrible looking area.
Now, I know in the 2 videos that preceded this one, Bob, the first on Kilimanjaro and the second on Aconcagua, to an extent, those 2 hills, going by the easiest routes, they can be ascended without much technical difficulty. Mm-hmm. What about Elbrus?
Again, Elbrus can be ascended without much technical difficulty. It's basically just like doing a Scottish hill in winter time. You know, it's snow, bit of glacier travel, but it's a straightforward mountain. It's just basically a big snow plod.
Would you be roped up?
You could be if you wanted, but we weren't roped up. Our Russian guides didn't feel that it was appropriate as an easy hill for them.
But wearing crampons?
We were wearing crampons and we had our ice axes with us.
Yeah. And what about the summit day?
The summit day was quite warm compared to my last of the 7 summits, Aconcagua. It was only about minus 15 degrees centigrade, including wind chill in the summit. So it was like a typical Scottish summer day, really. Yeah, it took a reasonable amount of time to get up. Can't remember exactly how long at the moment, but you know, it was straightforward, early ascent up the mountain.
Yeah.
And just like Kilimanjaro, it was nice seeing the sunrise and seeing the shadow of the mountain over the nearby plains of the Caucasus.
So the people that you went out there with, did they all summit?
Yeah, every one of us in the group summited, which was a great feeling. There's on the Aconcagua trip, some people hadn't summited, and we had to deal with the emotions of sharing tents with people who didn't summit, and we had summited and we had euphoria. So on Elbrus, everybody summited. At one point, I didn't think John Cuthbert was going to summit. So Graham and I descended down from the summit, met him, and then I went back up to the top again with John to take his photo. And I walked down with John.
But again, Bob, some of these mountains that you're talking about in these videos, the sensation and the emotion that you must have when you actually get to the top must be incredible.
Yeah, it's quite emotional when you get to the summit of some of these mountains, especially if you've had troubles or difficulties in getting there. And I'd gone through the motions of, I'm not going to get to southern Russia because I don't have my climbing kit. I don't have any equipment whatsoever. And so when you sort of feeling dashed at the first opportunity, but then to actually get there despite everything, you know, it's very emotional and can bring a tear to the eyes.
Because as well as the organisation behind the scenes, it's the physical exertion when you're there as well, isn't it?
Yeah, I would certainly say Elbrus was physically harder for me than Aconcagua, but that was because we were plodding through snow, more than 1,000 metres of pure, just one foot in front of the other in quite deep snow at times.
So was it clear on summit day?
We were lucky, we got a view from the summit. Number 3 done, 3 views from the top.
That's pretty good.
But we did see clouds moving in from the south, and we were very conscious there was a storm coming in, so we descended as quickly as we could, but it was whiteout conditions for us to get back down to the hut. Of course, our Russian guides had just abandoned us and we made our own way back down.
So as far as summit day was concerned, Bob, what kind of sort of length time-wise are you talking about from the time that you set off to make the ascent to getting back down to the hut?
If you excuse me a minute, I need to look at my crib sheet because it's been a while since I was out there.
But something like that, I should imagine you're leaving quite early in the morning or sort of mid-morning?
It was very early in the morning that we left. It was in the dark. It was about 9 hours it took us to summit.
Yeah.
So it was probably another alpine start, 5 or something.
They're long days, aren't they? Because you're then presumably talking about 3 to 5 hours to get down from the summit of the mountain down to the hut.
Yeah.
Big days.
Yeah, the big days. So physically you need to be prepared for 12 to 16 hours.
Yeah.
So big days.
And then from the hut, would it be coming down to the valley for the following day?
Once we've summited, it's a case of, right, let's get out of here. Let's go with a beer.
Yeah. Well, that was 3 done, isn't it, with Elbrus? And you mentioned, just to cover all eventualities, you had a quick 23-hour ascent to Mont Blanc as well.
Yeah.
So fascinating, Bob, hearing you talking about these trips. And before we do close off, any other comments concerning Elbrus that you'd like to share?
I would say Elbrus was a great experience, quite an eye-opener on Russian culture. I'm glad I've been down and seen it. I'm not in a rush to go back to that region again, particularly because some folk that know me know I don't like air travel too much, and we had a little bit of an issue with one of the aircraft flying back from Mineral Vody to Moscow, where during the flight there was some tannoy announcement, all in Russian. Of course, I'm not a fluent Russian speaker, but when you see people round about you adopting the crash position and the plane's going rather fast on landing, you're thinking, this isn't good. But thankfully we survived that one.
Well, Bob, it's been great meeting you again, and been fascinating listening to your exploits going up and down Elbrus out in Russia, and I'm looking forward to the future videos on your attempt on the 7 summits. So for now, Bob Kerr, many thanks.
Thanks, Myrddyn.